Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter for boxing-related tweets, or of course, you can subscribe to the channel here. Let's talk Kiko Martinez and Kid Galahad. On this particular video, I'm only going to discuss this fight because I want to get quite deep into it. I'm also going to do a video about Jaime Munguia's victory over Gabriel Rosado, and it's going to be on that video that I'm going to discuss a couple of the undercard prospects from the British card. So a bit of a mix and match. But, you know, you hardcore boxing fans out there, I'm sure you were interested in both cards. So let's get cracking. Kiko, of course, is now a two-weight world champion. Sergio Martinez has heralded him as the greatest Spanish fighter of all time. They are, of course, friends. I did a series of videos in the summer, Euro 2020 guide with a boxing historical twist. And basically what I was doing is looking at the nations that had qualified in the groups and looking at various historical boxing stories, the best fighters that those nations had produced, as well as some outlandish stories and funny stories from fighters from those nations. Now, back then, and I will put the video in the description box of this video for those that might be interested in this debate now that Kiko has been heralded in this way, I listed at the time Pedro Carrasco as being the best Spanish fighter of all time. Watch that video if you're interested and let me know what you think down below. Now, in terms of the fight itself, people will know that I'm an admirer of Kiko Martinez, okay? After the Zelfa Barra fight, a fight that I thought he won, I thought he beat Barrett, I did a technical breakdown on the subtle things that he does and how he goes about his work. This is a guy who's a lot shorter than most opponents with short arms. And although he carries pop for sure, he's not one of those one-punch knockout artists where, you know, he's heavy-handed, but he doesn't just touch you and put you to sleep. So he has to go about trying to set up shots and breaking you down. And so to have the success that he's had with the physical limitations that he's got is very impressive. I'm not going to keep going into everything that he does on every video. So again, with that video, I'll put that in the description box of this video too, if you're interested in how he goes about his work and the things that young fighters, young pressure fighters could really learn from a guy like Kiko Martinez. Especially if you are a shorter guy who carries a bit of pop, you might want to analyze a guy like Kiko, okay? There's no point in analyzing a Lawrence Okolie if you're a short guy and you're fighting, you know, in a manner that just you would not be able to carry out because of your physical construct, right? Having said all that, I do believe that Kid Galahad lost this fight. Don't get me wrong, of course, Kiko Martinez played his part. You can't undermine what he did. But I do think if Kid Galahad made certain choices, he would have gone on to have won the fight. Now, a lot of people are obviously talking about the fact, Aaron Barker brought it up on the telecast, that he pulled out in a straight line with his chin up. And he brought it up before he got dropped. Same round in the 5th round. And that is indeed true. So if you're looking at it from that perspective, yes, that is what caused the defeat. That error, pulling back with your chin up. However, there's a reason that these errors occur. So I want to get down to the nitty gritty of the tactical error that he was making that allowed this error to occur. I'm going to give you an analogy from the football world. Let's say, for argument's sake, your centre-back makes an error. Your central defender makes an error and it costs you a goal. Yes, everyone's going to point their fingers at the centre-back. But let's say the reason that occurred is because you kept leaving space on the left wing because your left fullback was overlapping the left winger and you weren't getting anyone over to cover. And cross after cross after cross you got away with. Then your centre-back makes an error based off of one of those crosses. That's what costs you the match. That's what concedes the goal. You can't forget the fact that the reason that error was made is because of the initial problem that you had. And there was an initial problem that Kid Galahad had. So let's talk about this. He's a brilliant, generally speaking, switch hitter. He's very fluid with it. He's very comfortable. However, what is the purpose of a switch? Switch hitting enables you to have an extra tool to your arsenal, an extra weapon. Let's say you pick up an injury with the lead hand. It enables you to switch. And now you can jab with your right hand out of a southpaw position. Or maybe you're testing the waters and you realize my opponent can't deal with the southpaw, so I'm going to stay southpaw because that's the problem that it gives him. Maybe by switching, you're creating new angles in the middle of a shift and you switch and you create a new angle and it gives you more success, more openings offensively. I want you to consider the analogy of a war, not a modern war, but the war of the past, whether you're a Spartan, a Macedonian, whatever it might be, right? A Roman, Mongol, whatever it is army that you admire from the past. I want you to imagine you are one of those soldiers and you are holding a shield and an axe. They are your weapons of choice. And in the back, you've got one of those sleeves with a sword in that you can pull the sword out, just like He-Man, right? When you're fighting with your axe, you're going to holster your axe at some point to pull out your sword because of whatever choice you've made. Maybe you feel that in that moment the sword is more appropriate. Well, in that moment between the shift of putting your axe in the holster and taking your sword out, you are vulnerable because you're unarmed. You're preparing to be armed again. Well, on multiple occasions, just after that switch or in the middle of the switch in stances, Kiko was landing shots. But a bigger problem than that was that out of the southpaw stance, Kid Galahad's distance control was nowhere near as good. And there were a whole bunch of warning signs of that right hand. And Kid was not adjusting. What he had to do is stay orthodox. Forget southpaw. You are not switching for the sake of switching. You are switching for a purpose. Does it provide you an advantage? If not, and it's providing your opponent with an advantage, you must cease it. It is a weapon. It's not something that you are inclined to do because you have to do it. It's not a duty. Now, I sat down and I wrote some notes looking at this, thinking, how many times has Kiko landed that backhand, that right hand, or indeed any significant power shot when Galahad was in the southpaw stance? And I looked at it and it was consistent. They weren't big shots, the majority of them. They weren't anything that you would say, whoa, this is a problem. Kid Galahad was in control. He'd hurt him on numerous occasions. To be fair to him, he'd even hurt him out of the southpaw stance. Offensively, he was fine from the southpaw stance. He'd caused Kiko some problems. But that distance control was not the same. When he was coming out of the orthodox stance, he was not only coming out orthodox, there was a slight dip to his own right-hand side. Now, broadly speaking, there are a couple of ways to fight a shorter fighter if you want to maintain range. We're being very broad now, okay? There are other ways too, but this is broadly speaking. Let's get a little bit technical here. I can lean back if I want and fight off the back foot. And if I'm moving backwards, yes, you shouldn't really move in a straight line consistently. But if you are going to move in a straight line, you can raise an arm, if your angles are right, to cut off the trajectory to your chin and backstep from there, okay? So any shot that's coming out on this side is going to be blocked by your leading arm. So there are certain things you can do, even if you're stepping out in a straight line. Really, even then, you shouldn't step out in a straight line. But you can step out in a straight line and still be safe on occasion. Because by the same token, if you're constantly moving at an angle, again, you're providing a pattern. What you want to do is avoid patterns. The problem with fighting off the back foot like that, one of the limitations, because there are always limitations to every style and every approach. If you want to bring your backhand into play, you're popping that jab and you're moving backwards. If you want to bring your backhand into play, say you're fighting out of an orthodox stance, when you twist to bring that right hand into play, your backwards momentum halts for a moment. You have to plant your feet. And the opponent can use your own punch, your own setting and rotation against you to close the range. If he slips that right hand, he's inside. And you are punching downwards. So you're actually, if he's shorter than you were talking about, right? We're talking about the dynamics of Kiko versus Galahad here. Or when Klitschko used to fight shorter fighters, whoever it might be. We're talking about the dynamic of fighting a shorter fighter. You then have to punch downwards, especially if he's going to come in low, like Kiko. When you punch down, it's just logical, right? If you stretch your arm out as far as you can, and in a straight line, you're going to be able to reach further away from your body than if your arm's still stretched out, but you can pull it down and point towards the floor. Simple, right? You are giving up that range. So another approach is something that George Groves used to do, for argument's sake, and that is to crouch at the legs, and George Groves was rangy. So you lower yourself. You're fighting yourself low. So although you're giving up height, your reach is being thrown via a straight shot, which enables that distance when you're stretched fully. Now, because your stance is going to tend to be wider in that position, you may be a little bit more immobile in terms of a little bit slower in trying to maintain range. You will produce more power though. And because the shots are coming from a straight line or perhaps even low and rising up, if you're going to throw shovel hooks and uppercuts, it also is harder to bypass unless he comes around you. In a straight line, it's harder to bypass just to slip either side and come inside. Well, Galahad, when he came out from an orthodox stance in the first round, there was a slight dip to his right-hand side and his legs were crouched. So he decided to go for that second option and it was working brilliantly. Fantastic. When he would switch to southpaw, because he didn't want to be doing the same thing on the opposite side and leaning towards that right hand, he was fighting a little bit more upright. That changes not just the visual of what is being faced here, but you're also opening up your body to that right hand. If I've got my back turned to you this way and you've got my shoulder and my back there, I can hide behind that shoulder. It takes away that backhand. Well, I'm turning towards the backhand here. And it was giving Kiko Martinez space to close the distance and to land that shot. And this happened consistently. It happened the first time, a backhand to the body with 13 seconds of the first round remaining. Then with 53 seconds of the second round remaining, you saw an over the top right hand, which landed on the inner shoulder. So that's not really a shot. As he's stepping back, it lands on the shoulder. It doesn't land. However, the reason it didn't land is not because there was a pullback, there was a reaction, there was a block. Kiko threw it from too far out. He didn't actually react to it, Kid Galahad. So had the distance been correct, you could argue that that might have landed. There was a right hand a few seconds later in the round that did land, however. Third round, we started to see the same thing. There was a short right hand, short right uppercut that lands on 2 minutes and 31 seconds of the round remaining. I'm not going to sit here and go through every single example here. So instead, I'll just show you my notes, and you guys can pause it if you like, and you can go and have a little research for yourself. But you can see I just showed you up here round 1, round 2, round 3 when these things were happening, and round 4. Then of course comes round 5. Spelled doesn't wrong. Don't worry, I do know how to spell doesn't. But it shows you they're not all landing flush. This one was a cupping shot, right? It's not that they're landing flush. The problem is that the distance control is not correct. Prior to the stoppage, the first knockdown, yes, he's pulling back straight. Even prior to that, as you saw in those notes there, you see this charge from Kiko Martinez early in the round. And it's a cupping shot, like I said, that lands. But then there's a short, straight right hand that does land. And he pivots out and he gets out. It's quite clear that Kiko is happier, as you'll see from all those examples, if you want to go and check it out, where he's landing. Now, they're not always looping shots. Sometimes they're straight shots. Often they're to the body. He was landing more to the body than he was to the head. But it was finding a home for that right hand. That's the point. He was giving him a home for it. Now, he gets caught with that shot and he goes down. He comes out, and what does he come out and do? Exactly the same thing. Southpaw stance. Standing straight in front of him. You don't switch for the sake of switching. You switch for a purpose. And that's the error, in my humble opinion, that Kid Galahad made. Let me know what you think. How do you think a rematch would go? I believe if he made the adjustment and stayed orthodox, he wins the fight by stoppage. And if I was Eddie Hearn, I would think about bringing together an all-Spanish card in Spain in between the potential rematches that might be involved here. Imagine you've got a card of Kiko Martinez, Sander Martin, who recently beat Mikey Garcia, and Kerman Leharaga. That's going to be a big card that you can build over there. It doesn't have to be a fantastic card where everybody's a pick'em. You don't want that because there's money to be made in these rematches. But what you want to do is build them up as stars in their home nations. Get them going on radio shows, talk shows. Get them appearing at football stadiums. They all support their football teams over there. And he has started Matchroom Spain. You know, so this is an area where he can really strike while the iron's hot. Yeah, let me know what you think about Kiko Martinez and what he's achieved, where he ranks in the annals of Spanish boxing history, and what you think that Kid Galahad will have to do, if indeed he can. You might not think he can. You might think this was inevitable. If he can win the rematch. Personally, I believe if he just changes things up tactically, he wins by stoppage. Thank you for watching, everyone. Take care. God bless.